Alongside the first look at the new Superman logo, James Gunn announced that Superman Legacy has been retitled to just Superman, which, while technically the same title as the 1978 movie, that was actually marketed as Superman the Movie. So this is at the very least the first movie marketed as just Superman. I personally really like this change. I never really liked the title Superman Legacy. It felt like the title of a sequel, or maybe even a movie about John Kent, who is like Superman's legacy, and that could very much be the title of a movie in the future, maybe if the universe lasts that long, where John Kent is the main character. Superman, on the other hand, is very clean and simple and shows a clear confidence in the movie, and this change and its positive effects have now set the precedent for more things to be changed, at least in the titles. But in this video, I'll be taking it a bit further, going over every confirmed project in the DCU and discuss what I would change, whether that be in the title, the confirmed cast or characters, directors, story details, or maybe even project type, or even the actual premise of the project. Keep in mind that none of these things are me complaining or saying I know better, just some things I could see potentially being improved from the current perspective of the fact that none of them have actually been made yet. Make sure to like, subscribe, let me know what you would change in the comments, and let's begin. The first DCU project is Creature Commandos, which is too far along the production process to make any changes, so speaking in a retroactive sense, I would definitely make it less connected to the DCEU, especially since it's the first DCU project. This would lead to a big change I would have made to the DCU from the get-go, which is that to avoid general audience confusion, I don't think anyone from the DCU should have returned. The only exception is maybe Zola Marijuana as Blue Beetle, since that movie can be very easily disconnected from the DCU, and then also maybe John Cena as Peacemaker if the season is all about the universe change. But for Creature Commandos, the fact that it's all an actual Suicide Squad and it's led by Amanda Waller and Johnny Economos will appear, I don't think that is a good idea. So that is what I would have changed about Creature Commandos. Make it not another version of the Suicide Squad, but just another government team like in the comics. Amanda Waller and Johnny Economos would either not appear at all or be recast, although that's a lot more likely for Amanda Waller. And finally, Weasel would simply be replaced by Wolfpack, who is a member in the comics, unlike Weasel. I personally really do not care in the slightest that certain actors, characters, or even storylines are being brought over from the DCEU and are being incorporated into the DCU, because I personally don't have a hard time keeping track. It's literally my job. General audiences, however, will definitely be pretty confused, and that might even sway them to not watch, which is a problem. If I can't make any changes that drastic, then there's not really anything about Creature Commandos I could think of changing. They did kind of completely change the team lineup, but I'll be honest, never really cared about Creature Commandos anyway. I don't mind them changing that aspect. The same is mostly true for Superman, although not because I don't care about Superman, it's just because they're doing basically everything right. And the only really big thing that I wasn't fond of, the title has already been changed. The only thing I'd consider changing aside from that is the casting of Nathan Fillion as Guy Gardner, since he's, I think, a bit too old and even too handsome to be the ideal Guy Gardner casting, even if he does wear a redhead wig. He also already played TDK in the pseudo-canon The Suicide Squad. It's not a big deal, and I don't really have any idea for who could replace him, but I do think that I probably would if I could. As for Peacemaker Season 2, which has recently been confirmed to be coming out before Waller, the decision to detach the DCU from the DCEU would definitely mean that Peacemaker 2 either wouldn't happen, or they just have the entire season be about the universe change concept. And honestly, this is true for the current version of the DCU as well. James Gunn did mention that the season will address the universe change, but when somebody suggested that Peacemaker should act like Psycho Pirate, who in the comics is the only person who could remember the previous timelines after every reboot, Gunn replied saying that he wouldn't put that big of a focus on the universe change. We obviously don't know what the season will be about just yet, but I do think the universe change should be the main focus of the season. That being said, this is a pretty minor thing that I could go either way on. Just the fact that it's being addressed is probably enough. And honestly, when it comes to Peacemaker, I have no idea what I would want. I didn't even think Peacemaker deserved his own TV show, even after seeing The Suicide Squad, but that ended up being the best thing to come out of the DCEU, so I do think whatever James Gunn wrote is probably the best it could be. Waller would certainly be heavily affected by the change I would have made in disconnecting the DCU completely from the DCEU. Obviously, in Amanda Waller being recast, which would be unfortunate because Viola Davis is pretty much perfectly cast, but also in Waller being a spin-off of Peacemaker and continuing the story that began there, that change would basically either entirely change the show or honestly get rid of it completely, and I don't think I would mind that at all. Viola Davis is perfectly cast. The showrunners have have a great DC track record, and they must have had a great story in mind to make an Amanda Waller show, but I really don't think Amanda Waller is the type of character who works as a main or titular character, so I do think that if this show were to be cancelled, I wouldn't really be the most bothered by that. It's probably the show I'm least excited about in the DCU. Disregarding that very drastic change, even with the DCU elements remaining, I would change the title of the show to Checkmate and have Waller share the main character role with other characters she forms checkmate with, like Sarge Steel, King Faraday, and whoever else appears on the show. If it's not Checkmate they're forming, then whatever other agency or organization it is that they are, and if they're not even forming anything in this, I just think that Waller isn't really that great of a title because it means that Amanda Waller is the main character, and again, I don't think she really fits as the title character of a series. Assuming they faithfully adapt the primary story elements and characters of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow, I would replace the Brigands Brigade, who are like the secondary main villains alongside Creme of the Yellow Hills, with named and memorable villains like the World Killers led by Rain, although this version does allow male members to allow for Creme of the Yellow Hills to join, or maybe other things like the Diasporans, an alien race of conquerors. Anything I think would be more interesting than the Brigands Brigade. Aside from that, everything we know about this movie sounds great, so there's nothing else that I would change. The Authority is certainly the movie that seems like the least safe bet. Obviously, we all said the same about the Guardians of the Galaxy, but the difference here is that DC has access to all of their characters and all of their teams, and I don't think the Authority even cracks the top 10 best teams in the DC universe. On top of that, I don't think the Authority fits into the DC universe nearly as well as they do in their own universe, as you kind of either have to completely change their premise, or just have them be shut down by the Justice League. In the Wildstorm universe, they could be considered heroes or anti-heroes. In the DC universe, they're just fully villains. Now, it's entirely possible that that's exactly what they're leading up to, and that does actually sound pretty great. That is something that I am excited about. But even still, I guess I would probably replace the Authority movie with a more prominent team, like the Teen Titans or Justice League Dark, or if we're keeping the Authority, then I would probably make this a Superman sequel with the Authority as the villains or supporting characters, or even turn this into a TV show with the same premise. If it does remain an Authority project, whether that be a movie or show, or having them appear not as the main characters, I'd also change the lineup of the Authority. Taking the original Authority lineup, I'd get rid of Swift, who's too similar to Hawkgirl, and Jenny Sparks, whose character is pretty much exclusive to the 20th century. To replace them would be Manchester Black and his sister Vera Black, aka Sister Superior. I think best case scenario here, while keeping it an Authority project, it would be a Superman sequel based on What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way, but the Authority instead of the team they inspired, the Elite, with the same lineup I just went over as the villains. A second best case scenario I would say is an Authority TV show and then an Authority movie with them as the main characters, and unfortunately it does sound like it's the third best option we're getting as opposed to the second or the first, which, while not a terrible thing at all, I do think it probably could be better, but again, nobody could have expected the success of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Maybe this will be the same. Inspired by the Superman Legacy title change, I changed the title of The Brave and the Bold to Batman the Brave and the Bold, the same as the cartoon, which parallels how the Batman has the same title as a cartoon that came out a few years before Batman the Brave and the Bold. Speaking of the Batman, I don't think it's a great idea to have two separate and technically competing live-action Batman franchises at the same time. Looking back, I definitely would have tried to incorporate the Batman, Robert Pattinson, Matt Reeves, and even the Penguin show into the DCU, introducing Dick Grayson as Robin in the Batman Part 2 and building the Bat family from the ground up. At this point, that's clearly not possible, so let's just move past that idea. I would definitely change the director. Andy Muschietti made It Chapter 2, and The Flash, and while the It movies are pretty good, The Flash is so bad that I really don't have faith in him as the director of a DC movie. Now, in his defense, The Flash was never going to be good since it starred Ezra Miller, but in addition to that, it never really felt like Andy Muschietti had full control, as the antics and attempted comedy felt very, very Ezra Miller. It also didn't feel like he ever had a clear vision aside from the gross textureless CGI that was apparently intentional to show Flash's perspective. If that was genuinely a choice, it was a terrible one, and honestly, I'd every single time rather a generic looking superhero movie which looks like every other one than one that looks so bad that it's practically unwatchable, even if it is a unique visual. He also directed the cameo scenes, which are some of the worst few minutes in DC movie history and show a clear disconnect between what Andy Muschietti considers to be important and what fans actually want to see. Now again, in his defense, Machete now has experience making a Batman movie, as The Flash kind of doubles as a Batman movie. And sure, Batman's fight scenes are mostly good, but honestly I don't think they ever were as good, speaking purely in choreography and visuals while ignoring the killing, as the warehouse fight in Batman vs Superman. Beyond the fight scenes, Batfleck's suit and characterization in his suit were awful, although he did have one decent scene with Barry as Bruce Wayne. While Keaton's Batman never really did anything or said anything too memorable, he was also just too old to be cool in my opinion. All of that is to say, I don't have much faith in Andy Muschietti directing The Brave and the Bold, so I would replace him. I don't really have a strong opinion on who should replace him, aside from it definitely should not be Zack Snyder. All that in mind, I'll keep my mind open for The Brave and the Bold. I hope to be proven wrong, and I know it could certainly be worse, but the director being Andy Muschietti after seeing The Flash does lower my anticipation, so I definitely change that. Looking beyond the director, I do agree with James Gunn in that Damian is my personal favorite Robin, at least in the role of Robin. That being said, the timeline and the age of Batman in comparison to someone like Superman, and also what seems like the rest of the world, would fit way better if it were an earlier Robin. There's also the matter of John Kent not being born yet, so we'd be missing out on that dynamic, barring any time travel, as well as the matter of Damian's extremely young age sounding very difficult to portray in live action, seeing as it'd have to be with a physically fit child actor with a specific ethnic background who looks similar to whoever will play Batman and Talia al Ghul. Keeping all that in mind, I'd probably, just to make it a little bit more likely to end up being good, I'd change the Robin of this movie to Tim Drake and have Batman be at the point in the timeline where Jason Todd recently died. Now, if they can execute both premises perfectly, I would definitely prefer the former with Damian Wayne, and so to make that easier and to keep Damian Wayne as the Robin of this movie, I think they should be allowed to age him up a bit. I think it's unreasonable to expect them to pull off a 10-year-old Damian Wayne, so maybe he could be around 13 or even 14, his current age in the comics, and have him be born during Bruce's training, which in this universe will be with the League of Assassins, who allow for slightly older and more experienced actors to be cast. Sticking to the world of Batman, the Arkham series is one we initially thought was going to be set in the Batverse, but was later confirmed to be set in the DCU, apparently the entire time. A horror-based show set at Arkham Asylum that introduces and explores some of Batman's Rose Gallery, which in this universe will already be very established, sounds like a really cool idea for a series. But if I had to choose a spin-off from the world of Batman and I was building a cinematic universe, it definitely would not focus on the villains. It'd be one of the Bat family members. Specifically, I think Nightwing has the most potential. He fits as a TV show and can also have a Batgirl like Barbara Gordon as a supporting character. Sticking to the same premise though, we don't know nearly enough about the series for me to change anything else, so let's move on. Swamp Thing is another project we don't know quite enough about for me to change anything, and what we do know, such as the premise, writer, and director, I'm a fan of. Just in case they make him practical like every other Swamp Thing appearance in live action up until this point, then I'd change that to CGI, as if there's anything that looks great in CGI, it's humanoid people made out of other materials. Swamp Thing, for instance, is very similar to Groot, and I think would look better and more like Swamp Thing if he was fully CGI. Lanterns is definitely the series I'm most anticipating, but I don't really like the title, especially since there's no reason not to call it Green Lanterns, since that title's never been used before. Neither has Green Lantern Corps, or any title that isn't just Green Lantern, since there's only ever been one live-action Green Lantern project. That same project completely tarnished the Green Lantern brand, especially in Warner Brothers' eyes, which is such a shame, since I think Green Lantern, in my opinion, has enormous cinematic potential, but a lot less so on TV. For one, because the Lanterns have pretty expensive looking powers and villains, but also because the most interesting Green Lantern lore and stories are all space-based. That in mind, I'd change Lanterns into a movie called Green Lanterns or Green Lantern Corps, which should be given the appropriate budget for a Green Lantern movie. The first movie could still take place primarily on Earth, but have a lot of scenes in space and on Oa, as the sequels would expand to primarily space. In the same vein, if this is supposed to be a long-running TV show, I'd change it into a miniseries and follow it up on with a movie trilogy / franchise. Paradise Lost is definitely a very interesting idea, and I'm certainly still interested in it. But in all honesty, I've never been a huge fan of the movies and shows that were like a hero's world without the hero, like Gotham, Krypton, and all the Sony Spider-Man villain movies. That's not to say those things are inherently bad, aside from the Spider-Man villain movies, which all are, but even the good good shows like Gotham and Krypton and movies like Joker are inherently missing something that I'd always feel like I'd rather be seeing, and so I'd replace this with a Wonder Woman show or movie that uses all of the same characters, including probably Cersei, who's the biggest Wonder Woman villain who hasn't been used yet in live action and would be my pick for the main villain of the next Wonder Woman project. She's also appearing in Creature Commandos, so her appearance in Paradise Lost seems very likely. Booster Gold is the series we know the least about, so there's nothing I could really change aside from maybe introducing Ted Kord if the series doesn't end up doing that, but it probably will, so for now, I guess no changes to Booster Gold. And finally, something unrelated to any specific project for now that I would change is the casting of Maxwell Lord, who's going to be played by Sean Gunn. Sean Gunn doesn't really feel like the right casting for the role, even if it's Maxwell Lord's less serious and less villainous original characterization. The real problem here is that Sean Gunn already plays Weasel, and he played Calendar Man in the Suicide Squad, even if that was a cameo. Will played G.I. Robot and Weasel again in Creature Commandos. He also had multiple roles in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. James Gunn having his brother played this many roles isn't the best look. It would be a way worse look if he wasn't a talented actor and voice actor and even motion capture artist, which he definitely is. However, it would look better if he was a better casting for Maxwell Lord, which in my opinion he kind of isn't, so I'd replace him with someone else, although I don't really know who that would be. And with all of that out of the way, let me know what you would change in the comments down below, what you agree with and what you disagree with in this video, and thanks for watching.